2NURFM's Health and Wellbeing for our sponsor Mullen Natural Health Centre, Hamilton.
Mr. Peter Mullen joins us for the second time for 2017. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Colin.
How are you, my friend?
Yeah, very well, thank you. A bit hot, like everybody else out there, but nice in here in the air conditioning.
Well, maybe we do it pretty well here, don't we? Otherwise, I'd be probably emotional eating. That's what the topic is today. What is emotional eating in a full?
Well, emotional eating is, there's lots of reasons why we're having such difficulty managing our weight in the Western world, and emotional eating is like a reaction that a lot of us have, that when we're stressed or under stress, we turn to food as a comfort. So I thought it's worthwhile really discussing that today.
Pete, and it's one of those things, isn't it, where people can feel probably powerless over their food cravings.
Yeah, look, Colin, it's one of those things, we always talk with with patients about, when we think about our health or our health, like we have a physical body, we have an emotional body, a mental body, and also a spiritual body as well. So and we've got some great free talks coming up on weight loss and, a lot of great information. But one of the really big challenges is because of the high levels of stress these days, like food for a lot of us, and I'm in this boat as well, food for a lot of us is part of our stress response.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that yourself? Like if you've been really stressed, you tend to go for...
Yeah, I go for Coke when I'm stressed.
Yeah, okay. Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, yeah. It's just one of those things,
Yeah.
I think it just releases the stress.
Yeah, well, what it actually does, when with cravings, like with emotional eating, say if you're really stressed and say in your example, like you go for Coke, one of the things possibly that your brain's looking for is the sugar, because sugar tends to stimulate a dopamine response in your brain. And dopamine is one of our feel-good hormones. So if you're stressed, your brain sort of says, well, if you give me a hit of sugar, I don't have to stay in this state. So it improves your state, like you get out of that stress state. The problem is that, one glass of Coke makes you feel a bit better, but there's no limit to the amount of Coke you can keep having. But and you'll keep getting that same response in your brain, but your body will be affected. Yeah,
okay. When does it begin? I mean, does it begin as a child?
Look, I think it does. I think our first lesson in self-soothing as children, after we've been, breastfed or fed by our parents, our first lessons in self-soothing is when we're able to feed ourselves. And often the eating patterns of the family, like in my family, it was all big meals. We all tend to be overeaters. You ate everything on your plate. So food was part of we've had a big day, we'll have a heap of food to celebrate or whatever.
Yeah.
And then as a kid, you sort of find the biscuit jar, and that's always a handy thing if you're feeling a bit bored or stressed or unhappy. You'd go and have a handful of biscuits. And I think those sort of patterns get a bit ingrained into us, that we sort of associate feeling a certain way, and that at some level we think that the food will make us feel better, which it does in the short term because you get that release of dopamine in your brain, but it doesn't fix any of our problems, and it contributes to a lot of health issues.
When we talk about, it beginning as a child, 20 years on, how do we fix this issue? I mean, for me, it'll be the biggest drama of my life if I have to stop drinking Coke,
Yeah, well, I've been meaning to talk to you about that, Colin, because you really do need to stop drinking Coke. I'll work out a plan for you.
All right.
But as adults, like comfort eating is something, like I know for me when I was younger, food was a lot more a part of my stress response. Whereas I think I'll probably always be a bit of a comfort eater or an overeater, but I do it a lot less frequently now, that it doesn't affect my weight or my health as much as maybe what it would have done if I was doing it every day or every 2 days or whatever. So I think hopefully as we get older, we get a bit wiser and learn other stress management techniques, like exercise. And I'll talk, interestingly, I'll talk about it a little bit later on, but there's quite a bit of research. We'll get to that in a minute. So back to the emotional eating. Learning better stress management sort of techniques.
Is it more prominent, from men to women? What would be your judgment on that?
Women generally tend to have more of a challenging relationship with food than do men.
Yeah.
But men might succumb more to things like alcohol or cigarettes or other substances as well.
there's something much deeper going on in your life, I suppose, you know, when it comes to food. You know, you've really got to kind of dig deep, don't you? Okay, so what's the problem? What is causing this problem, you know?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I'm a big fan of psychotherapy, seeing a psychologist. Like, if you think about it, like, and again, it comes back, comfort eating comes back to, you know, our mental health. Like, we've been using food as a substance to make us feel good since we first started to eat. And interestingly, you know, when we eat, it triggers a whole heap of neurotransmitters in our brain. Eating good food, people don't always stop to think this, but eating good food on a regular basis will also give us those feel-good endorphins as well.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just slowly changing the balance of the food we're eating, getting some help if there are deeper issues going on that, you know, we're using food as our drug of choice, seeing a psychologist or getting some help to actually work out what some of those issues are. I always say to myself, if I find myself, I say this to my patients, if you find yourself in front of the fridge, it's a bit late. It's like trying to shut the gate once the horse has bolted. But I always say to myself, if I find myself in front of the fridge, you know, not what do I feel like eating, it's what am I stressed about. And often, you know, that's a bit of a trigger to think, well, hang on a minute, I'm stressed because I've got that
or you're bored or
talk
something,
I've got to prepare for, or I'm telling myself that I'm bored, or I'm going in to watch TV. So that's often a choice or a place. Then you can make a better choice. You know, you may still choose to eat something, but you might get a piece of fruit and cut it up rather than a packet of chips or, you know, in some people's case, a can of Coca-Cola.
Yeah. And I suppose we can all tend to do it, whether you're bored, you know, feeling deprived of something, maybe disappointment, Pete. You know, how can we start to overcome this and develop a healthy relationship with food rather than cracking open a can of Coke?
Well, that's actually a great question, particularly how can we develop a healthy relationship again with food? Interestingly, of all the clients I've seen over the years, the ones that seem to live the longest, have the best health, they're all lean, they all exercise regularly, and they're not that fussed about food. Food's not their go-to thing. They'll eat, and they often eat similar things every day, but they're not people that really come home and look forward to that bit of cake that's in the fridge, or having a packet of chips on the way home from work, or, you know, having a soft drink or ice cream. So they have what I would consider to be a healthy relationship with food, in that food is sustenance, but it's not for our emotional pleasure. You know, I know for me, like, I like nothing better than, if I'm watching a movie, is to have something to eat with it. And it's taken me a long time to try and break that habit that if I'm eating, I try and eat at the dining room table. And, you know, if I'm watching TV or reading a book, then I'm watching TV or reading a book. I'm trying not to cross over my enjoyment and include food as part of that. So a couple of tips. Don't let yourself get too hungry, as that can leave you vulnerable to emotional eating. So, you know, a couple of my clients will be in a bad pattern where they'll have nothing for breakfast, a little lunch, and then they come home and the eating starts from dinner, and then they're eating right until they go to bed. So to try and balance blood sugar, you know, these people need to make sure they're having a decent breakfast, a decent lunch, and then before dinner of a night time, maybe have a piece of fruit in the car on the way home, or a heap of water. So don't let yourself get hungry. Choose foods that give you both enjoyment and nourishment. So as much as I said, you know, food shouldn't be our main source of pleasure in life, we do like to eat foods that taste good. So sometimes it's, you know, trying new recipes, trying some new foods that you like. I say to a lot of patients these days, like, eating well means that you can have really lovely tasting food that's also healthy for you. A lot of people think of healthy food as being the old carrot stick and the lettuce leaf.
I've happened to have a look at your website quite a lot after doing this program with you. I'll tell you, my friend, you have some fabulous recipes on your website.
Yeah, we do. We really have a lot of stuff on there for people that, you know, are keen to try some new things. But finding food that you love that's also healthy, that's really the key. Being mindful when you eat. You know, eating should be something that we actually stop, sit down, have food on a plate, chop it up into small pieces or whatever, and then chew well and eat slowly. So never eat on 2 feet. You know, if you eat standing up at the counter, you're going to eat more than you really need, and you're probably going to eat the wrong type of food. So always make sure that you even if you're going to choose to overeat or comfort eat, get the food out, put it on a plate, sit down, and consciously while you're eating it, have a think about what you're doing. And sometimes you won't eat as much, but just be conscious of what you're. So eat mindfully, we say. Try and identify and understand what your emotional triggers are. So you were saying in the break before, like with Coke, it'll be if you've stressed, if you've got work pressure or a budget or a deadline you've got to meet. That's when you're maybe going to go more likely towards a can of Coke.
Yeah. So it's identifying those, those weaknesses.
There's not weaknesses, they're triggers.
Okay, yeah.
So it's like people that eat, go to watch TV but they walk past the fridge. It's recognizing, every time I watch TV, I've got to have something to eat. What can I do differently here?
Yeah, okay.
Or, eating in bed. Every time I go to bed, I've got to have a chocolate.
People do that?
Well, some people do.
Goodness me.
I have been known to do it in stressful circumstances.
Of course.
And identify and understand your emotional triggers, and this is where seeing a psychologist can be really beneficial.
Yeah.
And there are psychologists that really specialize in people that have comfort eating issues or that tend to overeat.
Yep.
Find alternatives to food that you can turn to for emotional fulfillment. Things like yoga, meditation, just other exercises. There's some great emotional release techniques. One's called emotional freedom technique, or tapping, where you actually tap acupressure points. So if you find yourself starting to head towards the fridge and you're craving certain foods, tapping can help to break. Sounds funny, but tapping can help to break those emotional patterns or emotional links. And the main thing I find with emotional eating or overeating for any of us is, if it happens, there's no point feeling guilty about it. Sometimes people come and say, I ate a whole block of chocolate and then I spent the next 2 hours beating myself up over the fact that I did it. For us emotional eaters, it's going to happen. It's going to happen again. It's not something we'll probably ever just stop, and it'll never ever happen again in our lives. But we get better and better at managing it. And if we fall off track and you find yourself you're back in a cycle of emotional eating again, you're only as good as bad as your next decision. So there's no point beating ourselves up. It's just, okay, let's go back to being mindful, having a plan, working out what we're going to be eating, and try and do it in a more conscious sort of manner.
And there's a lot more to it, isn't there? You were talking about bugs.
Well, yeah, there's some interesting new research coming out that our gut bugs, and we talk a lot on this show about gut health and gut bugs, but that our balance of gut bugs may actually influence the foods that we crave. So we've been talking about emotional issue, but this brings up another whole, opens another whole can of worms, in that our balance of gut bugs, like gut bugs need different foods to survive, and if your gut bugs are out of balance, then those bugs, through a various quite amazing connections. We talked a lot about the connection between the gut and the brain. So these gut bugs actually will send messages to your brain requesting, the food sources that they prefer to eat. Now, interestingly, they've found that in obese individuals, they tend to have a lower microbial diversity, so they have a less wide range of bugs. So for people that have trouble losing weight, their gut flora may actually be contributing to why they're having problems, because it's sort of causing them to crave against certain foods that they may not crave if they had the right balance of gut bugs.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, are we living with gut bugs, or are gut bugs living with us?
That's exactly right. Like, yeah. Are we just
who's intruding?
Are we hitching a ride on them?
Exactly. Yeah. So it may be completely not our fault.
Absolutely, it's our bugs that are the problem.
That's right. It is. Now, you've got some very interesting talks about weight loss and kids' health over the next couple of months. 14th of February, you've got one on weight loss.
Yep.
How do we get there? Plenty of seats available still?
Yeah, if people get onto our website at mullenhealth.com.au, they can just get a ticket. We prefer people to get a ticket.
Yep.
There's no charge. It's a free event. And the last one we had sold out. So if people are keen to come, if they can get on sooner than later. And at that talk, I'll be talking a lot about some of the blocks for weight loss, why people really seem to be having trouble losing weight. Weight loss seems to be a lot more complex these days than what it was when I started practice 20 odd years ago. And I think because of a whole heap of reasons. So we cover those on the night. But also this is for anyone that's lost a lot of weight successfully, but then, gone back and put it all back on again. So there's some tips and clues of how to have better results in the future.
Awesome. All right. And next week we'll talk about weight loss just before the talk.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much for your time today. This is 2NURFM.